People spend countless hours building meticulous financial spreadsheets, projecting exact returns and specific retirement dates decades into the future. But if a plan requires absolute perfection to succeed, it isn't actually a plan. It is a fragile wish. Consider an elite blackjack card counter. They possess intense mathematical prowess, tracking every card dealt to calculate the odds of what remains in the deck. Yet their entire system relies entirely on humility. They know they cannot predict the exact next card. Because they accept there is a decent chance they are wrong on any given hand, they deploy a specific survival mechanic. They never bet every chip in front of them. This is the core mechanic of investing survival. Benjamin Graham, the father of value investing, adapted this humility into a concept he called the margin of safety. The purpose of a margin of safety is not to help you make a better, more accurate forecast about the stock market. Its purpose is to render the need for a forecast entirely unnecessary. You widen the gap between what you think will happen and what can happen, so you can endure the difference. In late 1942, an elite German tank unit sat in reserve on the grasslands outside Stalingrad. When they were desperately called to the front lines, the commanders discovered that out of 104 state-of-the-art tanks, fewer than 20 could even turn on. They had the most sophisticated military equipment in the world, but during their weeks of inactivity, field mice had nested inside the vehicles and eaten away the insulation covering the electrical systems. The engineers had planned for mud, cold, and enemy fire. They did not plan for mice. We can calculate the odds of a recession or buy insurance for a medical emergency. We cannot foresee the field mice. The single most important part of any financial strategy is leaving enough room for error to survive when the outside world refuses to follow your spreadsheet. The outside world is unpredictable, but our own minds are arguably worse. When it comes to long-term planning, humans are profoundly poor forecasters of what their future selves will actually want. Psychologists call this the end of history illusion. We are keenly aware of how much we have grown and evolved in the past, but we walk around with the enduring, false belief that we have finally become the person we were always meant to be and will never change again. A young man from a modest background made it his lifelong dream to become a doctor. The odds were stacked heavily against him, but he pushed, worked tirelessly, and a decade older than his classmates, he eventually reached the top of medical school and entered the profession. 15 years later, he despises the career. The stress and the relentless hours have worn him into the ground. He is as utterly miserable where he is today as he was driven to get there a decade ago. This happens because of sunk costs. We anchor our current life decisions to the massive effort we spent in the past. We refuse to abandon a miserable career or a failing financial plan because we already paid for it. We become prisoners to the ghosts of our past selves. The fuel for this regret is extremes. Assuming you will be happy living on an extremely austere budget or choosing to work endless, grueling hours in pursuit of extreme luxury leaves no room for your desires to shift. Moderate savings, moderate free time, and moderate goals provide the flexibility required to endure.
Compounding wealth takes decades. To survive a multi-decade journey, you have to accept the reality that you will change your mind. You have to learn to abandon outdated goals without mercy, rather than putting them on life support and dragging them into a future you no longer want. Everything in finance demands a price. The massive historical returns of the stock market are real and documented, but the price tag is hidden until the bill is overdue. This chart shows the Dow Jones from 1950 to 2018. The black line shows a phenomenal 11% annual return. But notice the dense gray vertical bars. Each represents a period where the market was down at least 5%. That gray area is the hidden cost, the fear, the doubt, and the literal physical exhaustion investors feel when they watch a third of their net worth evaporate. That is the currency required to purchase those long-term returns. Attempting to get those returns for free leads to disaster. Throughout the 1980s and 90s, General Electric CEO Jack Welch became famous for delivering exact, predictable earnings every single quarter. He massaged the numbers, pulling gains from the future to hide the natural, volatile reality of his business. The illusion collapsed. The losses Welch shielded with accounting maneuvers compounded over time, leaving his successors and GE shareholders to pay a mammoth, multi-billion-dollar bill. the stock plummeted, and the financing division was sold for scrap. Most people view market drops as a fine, a punishment for making a bad decision, but you cannot avoid volatility any more than GE could. Investors have to shift their mindset and view volatility not as a fine, but as a mandatory fee. You gladly pay $100 to enter an amusement park because you know the experience is worth the cost. Viewing market drops as the admission ticket for long-term growth is the only psychological trick that lets you stick around long enough to win. We know about leaving room for error. We know our goals will change, and we know we have to pay the price of volatility. So why do massive financial bubbles still form, repeatedly wiping out millions of rational people? Bubbles occur because of a single, deeply ingrained fallacy. We look around the market and falsely assume every other investor is playing the exact same game we are. In 1999, tech stocks were trading at astronomical, seemingly absurd prices. But for a day trader on the exchange floor, it made perfect sense. It didn't matter if Yahoo was trading at $5 or $500. If a trader's time horizon is only 3 hours, long-term valuations are irrelevant. The only thing that matters is capturing the immediate momentum before the closing bell. The tragedy happens when these timelines cross. Housel looks at the momentum trader paying wild prices, assumes the trader knows a secret, and blindly copies their behavior. Taking financial cues from someone whose timeline, worries, and goals are entirely disconnected from your own is a guaranteed path to ruin. You buy a house to live in for a decade, taking cues from a speculator flipping it for a quick profit next month. Someone gets hurt. The financial world is loud, filled with people telling you what to buy, how to spend, and when to panic. Before making a decision or emulating a success story, strip away the noise. Look at your timeline and answer, what game are you playing?